Hello, I'm Ray Mofield, and this is the Oral History Program. We're visiting today on Marywood Drive in the city of Benton, and we're visiting in the home of Dr. and Mrs. Joe Jones. Now, Joe was born in Marshall County, I believe. Is that right, sir?
That's right.
Thank you very much for letting me come. Who was your father, Joe?
James L., or Fate Jones, as he was known to everyone.
Well, now, I've heard of Fate Jones all my life. Of course, my dad is from Olive, Hardin area. My mother from the Alamo region. But I didn't know his name was James L. Who was your mother before she married?
She was a Tucker.
Uh-huh. Well, of course, there are a lot of Tuckers in this country. I had a neighbor named Corbett Tucker.
I don't think we were related any, although we may have been distant.
Way on back down the road somewhere. What, do you happen to remember either of your grandfathers?
Yes, I remember my grandfather Tucker and my grandfather Jones.
And their names were
William, and he was known as Bud Tucker, William Bud Tucker, and my other grandfather was James Henry Jones, known as Jim Henry Jones.
Well, I believe I've heard of Jim Henry Jones quite a bit, too. Let's see. There's so many Joneses in the world. I don't know if that's about the third or fourth most plentiful family in America. I believe they claim Smith is number one.
Yeah, Smith.
But maybe Johnson along in there somewhere. Browns and Joneses. So you would undoubtedly have thousands and thousands of Jones families that you were not related to in any significant way.
Right.
I remember in the Roosevelt administration there was a fellow in Houston named Jones who built Houston and Texas up real big, and he was one of those $500 million Jones families. I presume your dad wasn't
right.
in quite that same situation. Was he a farmer?
Yes, he was a farmer.
Well, how many children were there in his family?
5. There's 3 boys and 2 girls. So.
Now, I remember one. I can't think of his name except that everybody called him Bounce.
Yes, that was the...
He was a good basketball player. I remember that when he was in high school. And I know he was principal over Joppa, wasn't he, for a good many years?
Yes.
I don't know where all he worked in the school business, but he was an administrator.
He was superintendent there for about, I guess, 12, 15 years.
Now, what part of the county were you born in, Joe?
Well, I was born near Unity Church, within less than a half a mile.
That's familiar to me because of my Uncle Kelsey Warren and Aunt Vera. And, of course, Uncle Kelsey's buried there at that church cemetery. And there was a school and a church.
Right, Unity School.
So many times we've commented about all over the county there'd be a church like, well, right over here, not too far from us now, there was a Methodist church called Church Grove. There was a school there. My wife went to a place called Oak Valley, and church and school. So you could duplicate that in the case of Unity.
Right. My first school was at Unity.
Do you remember who your first teacher was?
Yes, Pansy Henderson.
Oh, yes. Well, there are lots of Hendersons in that area.
She was sister to Ruth Henderson, married to Johnston. And I had her as a teacher in high school, and my first teacher was Henderson.
She married Distant Johnson.
Yes, right.
And lived at, I believe it was 808 Main Street in Murray. I remember her well. She gave me a book one time of a genealogy on the Mofield family. And somewhere way back down the road, we were kin to the Hendersons. My dad was, anyway. So I remember her quite well. And I remember particularly going to Unity School. Audine and Ann Warren were going there. And the time I remember the most, I guess, well, I think it was Christmas of '37 that I went there, and they had a Christmas program, and Audine and Ann were in the little play that they had. They used to do things like that. And then I believe it was the fall of '39, or maybe 40 or maybe 41, there was a Methodist preacher in Hardin named W.T.M. Jones, and they asked him to make a little religious talk, and they asked me just to make some kind of a talk. I don't know whether it was, maybe the difference would have been something like commencement and baccalaureate. And we drove over together, opened up the first day of school. Did they do things like that when you were going, or have a program of some kind?
Well, yes, they usually have some program the first day. Of course, then you didn't pre-register. You just went the first day of school and then started classes.
Now, the teacher, I guess, didn't have much way of knowing who would be there till they showed up.
That's right.
Now they catalog you the day you're born and give you a social security number and get you on the right trail, put you in kindergarten. I don't guess I knew what kindergarten was. But
no, they didn't have kindergarten, or at least I'd never heard of it when I was a kid.
Well, any more of your teachers that you can think of?
Yes, Eltis Henson was one of my teachers. Edward, they were half brothers. Henderson, Eltis Henson and Edward Henderson, and Ruth Johnson.
Well, he stayed in education. I know he coached basketball, I believe, at Calvert City, and maybe took a team to the state tournament along about 34 or 5, along in there someplace, 33. And then he went to Murray State as field service director, and then he was principal at Harrisburg, and then he was head of the college there, and then he went up in Illinois to Galesburg.
Yes, he was the president of the...
I believe that was Carl Sandburg College.
Yeah, I think that was correct, the junior college.
And he had twin boys, if I remember right.
Yes, I think they were both lawyers now.
Yeah. So you had some real fine teachers, even though it was a one-room country school, and many people look back at that and say, well, if you don't go to a big school, you can't go to college. Well, that didn't work in your case, did it?
No, I went the first school I went to was Unity, a one-room school, and then the next one was the Heights, a one-room school. And then after that,
Was Heights fairly nearby, I guess? Not too far away?
Well, from where I lived at that time, because we moved, and then I went to Aurora then the rest of the time. From about
you finished high school at Aurora.
Aurora.
What was the last year that operated? About 41, was it?
Yeah, 41 or 2.
Somewhere along there.
41 or 2.
I know Glenn Warren was in one of the classes, I guess 1940 maybe. Do you remember, there was a fellow who has kind of spent his professional life in Frankfurt. I talked to him one time when we were trying to get the college bill passed to make Murray a university. And he worked in economic development. His name is Damon Harrison.
Yes,
And he told me he graduated from Aurora High School. Now, there was another Damon Harrison, one in my class at Hardin, Gus's son. But these are different. Now, you knew the one of...
Yeah, I went to school with Damon at Aurora, and I hadn't seen him from, I think he graduated in about 35, until about 5 years ago when I was passing through Frankfurt, and I stopped seeing him.
It's a lot of fun for me to go back to visit with the schoolmates and so on. He's done very well.
Yes.
And had a good role to play in the economic development of Kentucky, industrialization
Yes, sir.
programs in several different administrations. Well, you finished high school at Aurora. Say he was in the class 35, and you were what, about
38.
38. Uh-huh. And where did you go on to school from there? Did you?
Well, I went to a business college in Paducah, and then I went into service, and I was in service 4.5 years. And then when I came out, I went to Murray.
Yeah. Now, did you major in agriculture?
Yes, I majored in ag.
I don't know whether you certified as a high school teacher, but I think in those days you had to take about a last semester up at Lexington.
Right, no, I'm not certified for a high school teacher. It's a little hard. They require you to take the education courses, excuse me, for high school, and they don't for college.
That has always amused me a little bit, but of course it's happened to, I guess, 99% of the university faculties did not certify as, maybe unless they were in the College of Education, perhaps they did. All right, then you finished at Murray after the war.
After the war, right.
You were able to take the GI Bill, as
Yes.
so many millions of Americans did. And then what did you begin to do?
Well, I taught veterans in Missouri for 4.5 years after after I graduated from Murray. And then when I left Missouri, then I went to University of Kentucky for my master's degree. And then after that, I went to Ohio State University for my PhD.
Well, you went up to Columbus. Now
Yeah,
that
Columbus.
is a big factory.
Yes, it is.
I remember going up there one year. I was on the regional Boy Scout board, and the meeting was in Columbus for the states of Kentucky, Ohio, West Virginia, and maybe Michigan. I've forgotten. And it ran throughout the week and ended on a Saturday morning, and they gave us tickets to see Ohio State play Michigan State. Now, that was always kind of a blood game,
Right.
like Michigan. And we went out there, and they sang, stood up and sang Carmen, Ohio, and cried, and then they went after Michigan State. Poor souls. They didn't seem to have a chance that day, and Ohio State won by a fairly big margin.
Yeah. Well, Ohio State and University of Michigan were the two biggest rivals. The assistant coach at one time under Hayes at Ohio State went to University of Michigan as the head coach there, so there was extreme rivalry between those two.
Now, let's, when you got through there, did you, I know when I was teaching at SIU Carbondale, you were there, but you didn't go there first.
No, I stayed at Ohio State for 5 years after, well, I worked with the U.S. Public Health Service for 3 years, and then at Ohio State for 5 years, and I went to SIU in '64, and I believe that's about the time you left, wasn't it?
That is the year I left, yeah.
Because I know in talking to one of the newsmen, Albert Meyer.
Oh, yes.
In our
Albert
department.
Meyer. Oh, he was a great guy.
Yeah, he spoke very highly of it.
You know, they had me doing everything. I did a weekly roundup show, started on radio, and Albert Meyer wrote the script, and it was a review of the week in agriculture. And then when the TV station came on in, I believe it was October '61, I started doing an hour show on agriculture on TV, and then I did an hour show in sports and an hour show in general news. So they really worked me pretty hard, but I learned the business inside and out. And I remember with a lot of pleasure Albert Meyer. He was a great guy.
Yeah, he was.
Now, I believe Albert died, didn't he? Or,
Well, no, he's
he
still living
living?
as far as I know.
I guess he just retired, and I
Yeah, he
lost
retired
track
a
of
few
it.
years ago.
They had not only a very fine information service for the whole school, but the individual colleges had good people in them, like Albert Meyer. And well, what did you first do after you say you worked for the Public Health Service? Was that around Columbus?
No, we worked pretty well over the eastern, southern part of the United States.
Mhm.
We
Well, I wanted
traveled
to,
a lot for that.
let me ask
We
you
were
one more
doing
thing.
research.
Agriculture, when you just say that word, that in the universities, that's an awfully big word.
Yeah, just
what
a
was
general,
what was your specialty?
soil physics.
Mhm.
We have several different fields in agriculture. We have physics, chemistry.
Agronomy,
right.
horticulture.
Well, those all come under. We have those.
Live.
See, like I was in soils,
Beef, swine.
but you'll have several areas within soils. You got microbiology of soils, soil chemistry, soil physics, conservation.
I knew a man up
morphology and
there once
classification.
that specialized in weeds.
Yes, you have that.
And there were a good many of them that I came to know pretty well. Walter Wills was an economist, as I remember,
Yes.
an agricultural economist. They did a lot of wonderful things there on the farm, and demonstration of
Sure.
crops and research of every kind. Well, I kind of interrupted you there. You were then in soils.
Yes.
As kind of a general field. Okay. And then you started doing what?
But when I was with the Public Health Service, I was doing all research in the FHA had made a lot of loans, and the septic systems, see, where they drain into the soils,
Mm-hmm.
were giving them trouble. So the homeowners then would just move out and leave the homes into the FHA, which they had to take back.
Mm-hmm.
So they gave the funds to the Public Health Service so that we could do the research. So this was what I was doing for 3 years.
Some kinds of soils would percolate a lot more than
Right,
others,
right.
wouldn't they? So you,
That's,
I guess you run tests on that.
yes, we did test. Well, we'd go in and get the homeowner's permission, and then we would actually dig down into the system and to check the sealing. Now, what happens is as you run your effluent into the soils, you get a clogging of the soils. So after a period of time, well, any of them will clog.
Yeah.
And you would think that the sands which are more porous, which drains better at start, but they actually clog faster than some of the other soils.
Well,
So,
I've learned something there.
which was very unusual,
Mm-hmm.
because they would clog.
When you were growing up on the farm, I guess you had to sucker tobacco,
Yes, I've done that.
worm it, and
Worm, tobacco, top it.
did you ever? You weren't so far from the Tennessee River in there.
No.
Did you ever? Wilson Gant told me one time that he paid his way through Murray State by muscling.
Right.
Did you ever hear of that?
Yes. Yes, that was. Well, during the summer, a lot of the farmers would. Well, they called digging for mussels. They had what they call the brails and the wire hooks that they would
Mhm.
drop down in the water, and there were some the fellows that started in the spring and went all the way through the summer into the fall. But you had those.
I wonder why that dropped off so much since the World War II.
Well, after the you had the flooding of the river, and it was probably the waters were so deep, and then also the you couldn't tell where the channel
Mm-hmm.
would be, and then probably other work in the area was better paying,
more profitable,
right,
and so they didn't do it. And of course, back then, in those days, I think they made what they call mother of pearl buttons for men's shirts, and now they start doing them out of plastic. But the Japanese are buying shells and putting them inside of oysters as an irritant to create pearls.
Yes, I was in Japan. It was 2 years ago this summer, and we went through they showed us the process that they used to do that. It was quite interesting.
You know, SIU has one of the biggest programs in the nation of operating schools in foreign countries. There's a big operation in Southeast Asia, Thailand, Siam, they once called it, and so on. Were you ever involved in any of those?
Yes, I was in the program in Brazil. I was there for 2 years and 2 months.
What did they do in South America there?
Well, the
Coffee plantation, maybe?
they did not in the state that I was in. We were in the most southern state of Brazil, and it was just a little too cool there in the wintertime for coffee. But the adjoining state north of us grew, and then the next one up.
You were down toward Argentina, Paraguay, I guess.
Yes, we weren't too far. We were about in the middle of the state, and we were probably 100 miles or 125 from Argentina, Uruguay, and Paraguay.
Well, that must have been very interesting. Did you try to learn to speak Portuguese?
Yes, but
You
I
weren't
didn't.
real fluent. Huh?
Not real fluent, not as much as I would like to have been.
Yeah.
We didn't have as much training as I would like to have had.
Well, before we get too far gone and time is flitting away, we're down to about 7 or 8 minutes now. Where did you meet your wife?
Well, we went to school together at Aurora, but we didn't date until after we were both out of school.
I see. You didn't have to go all the way to Europe
No.
together. Right here in Marshall
Right
County.
at home.
Now, what was her name?
Levitt, Jess Levitt. She's Jess Levitt's
Jess
daughter.
Levitt's daughter. Well, there are lots of Levitts,
Yes,
of course,
lots
in
of-
the county. You were married after the war or before?
Well, it was really during the war. I was in 3 years. I went in 41, and we married in, well, not quite 3 years, 40, 43.
Do you have any children?
No, we have no children.
Your wife might have been involved in one of those degrees they talked about back then, PhD, putting hubby through.
Right. Yeah, she did her part for that.
Well, that's fine. Now, how do you remember agriculture and this area changing since you were growing up?
Well, it's been tremendous changes. Of course, back then we used very little fertilizer, and when we did, it was only for cotton and tobacco, for the most part, and not for corn, or for well, some of them used it for hay crops.
It seemed to me like my dad used to sort of resent fertilizer. People would sit around the benches there at Horace Warren's store in Hardin and talk against it. I don't know what they had against it particularly, but
Well, I don't either.
Maybe
Because a lot of them would say, well, it would burn your crops up.
Oh, yeah. If it doesn't rain, then she's all gone.
But that's not necessarily true, because you couldn't afford to farm today without using the fertilizer that's needed.
Did you play basketball?
Yes, I played.
I remember your brother did, and was very good. I guess Hardin was a big rival.
Yes, Hardin was.
And let's see, you finished in the class of '38. That was, I think, the last year we had all 8 high schools. There was.
Yes, I think that was.
The next year, Joe Fawkes went to Catawba instead of Birmingham, where he'd been playing, and then Red Metcalf, I believe he went to Calvert from Gilbertsville, and Herbert Hurley, I guess he went to Calvert.
Yes,
too.
I think he played at Calvert.
So.
And those two played at Murray, I believe.
Uh-huh. So you got to play against Joe Fawkes.
Yes, and James King also, the one that won the state championship in '38.
Sharp was king of the walk that year, and in many ways, I guess they were the best team in America. They beat St. X, which won the National Catholic Tournament. We didn't have a national high school tournament at that time, but they had to be good. And Jim King played for Adolph Rupp.
Yes. When I was in the Air Force, we had a team, and one of the fellows on our team played for Oregon, and he said he played against James King, and he said he was the best player that he'd ever played against or he'd ever seen play.
And the poor fellow got killed in the war,
yes.
So had he come back, you may remember that when the war ended, the team that Rupp had, about 46 maybe, there were 7 All-Americans on there. And he couldn't start all of them. He had a little dissension because of that. Now Jim King had come back.
There's been more.
Yeah, well, of course, I remember that team pretty well. I was a sophomore that year at Hardin, and I know, Red Culp went to Murray.
Right. He played. He was a very good player, too, King and Culp. Well, in fact, they were all good.
He was
Brooks
they were all great players, and they all made up a good team. Culp was just about as good a one-hand shooter as I had ever seen in those days. And boy, he could really stand out front. Wouldn't he have loved the 3-point rule? That would have made his day.
Yes, that would.
Yeah. Well, is there anything particular you'd like to say, looking back on your career, or do you think starting in Marshall County held you back in particular, or you happy with the way things have worked out for you?
I'm happy the way things have worked out. I mean, actually, you would always change.
What got you to go to Southern?
Well, my father and mother were, my father at that time, my mother had died, was in bad health, so I wanted to get close to home. Because I was having to run back and forth from Columbus to Kentucky.
And that was the nearest major university.
Right, that had an opening at that time.
Which the school was growing very rapidly.
Yes, it was
back
growing.
in those days. Dr. Morris had made a vow that they were going to be one of the great universities in America, and I think he lived up to his promise.
Yes, he was a great man. I think that he did an awful lot for Southern Illinois. And
you have any funny stories you'd like to put on here?
No, really,
I don't. Fall out of an apple tree and break your leg.
No, but I fell off a horse a few times.
And embarrassed yourself, at least. Yeah. Well, very good. I hear you're still working a little bit, going back over into Illinois.
Yes, working a little. Yeah.
But you have officially retired.
I have officially retired, and I work more or less when I want to work, which makes it nice.
Oh, that's good. Well, I see we've run out of time. Thank you very much, Dr. Joe Jones. It's been a pleasure to visit in your home here in Benton. This is Ray Mofield. Now back to our studio.